You can call the meeting to order. It's all yours.
All right. Yep. All right. Well, let's call this meeting of the Budget Advisory Commission to order. A roll call. Do you want to do roll call, Lance, or
sure?
Do you want me to?
I'll do it. Nolan.
I'm here.
Alyssa.
I'm here.
Lindsay.
Here.
Tasha.
Here.
Lindy.
Here.
Jonathan.
Here.
Carla.
Here in spirit.
Jimmy. All right, you have a quorum.
All right, first item of business is the approval of the agenda. I'm not sure if everyone's got it in front of them and has taken a look at it yet. If so, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
This is Alyssa. A motion to approve.
Is there a second?
This is Lindsay. I'll second.
Okay. If there's no objection, then I think we can approve our agenda as it currently sits. And with that, move on to our next action item to talk about CARES Act funding framework allocation and guidance.
So, Mr. Chairman, maybe I'll start it off. I sent an email, to back up, we have a couple new members here, at least Star Marset from the school board wasn't with us last week in a work session, but just as a reminder to everyone, last week, the Budget Advisory Commission had a work session for the specific purpose of looking at the allocation of CARES funds. And we had the Chief of Staff, Jason Bockenstead, sort of run through the information along with Assemblymember LaFrance. And there was Nolan shared some information, and we had some tables up on the screen that we shared that talked about where the allocation of funds were. Lila, can you bring that one up? I'm going to ask, so this is the sheet that we started with. And we had, I think, a pretty good discussion, but our hour ended at noon last Thursday, and the commission was just starting to sort of deliberate and discuss how they wanted to move forward. And in my email that I sent to the invitees, I think I captured where I thought we ended. And that is, we looked at the framework, we looked at the allocation. Mr. Bockenstead talked about the Treasury guidance, and then the BAC members started to express their thoughts about the framework, the allocation, and then some things that they thought as we move forward, how the BAC might want to comment or advise the Assembly and the Budget Advisory Commission. And to that point, I think I got the general sense of what we did and where we ended in that email. And just to summarize briefly, I had a sense that the BAC was pretty good with the structural framework. Remember, that had the categories of where they wanted to spend, where the monies were to be spent, and then the timing, whether it would be short-term or long-term. I think the chair was asking if there were any serious concerns or changes. I got the sense that that was okay. And then from that point, I didn't hear any questions about the particular programs, with the except that there needs to be more information available and more detail. And Desiree, I believe she sent a link, and if not, I did take a look at the Assembly's webpage. Right on the front, they have coronavirus, and each one of these projects has a little short explanation about what it would be used for. And then beyond that, I think there was some interest that their funds be spent on training programs, and that whatever is being done either now or in the future, that the allocation of any resources, they be more proactive rather than reactive, right? I think initially there was some reaction, but I do believe that the allocation of funds moving forward, there's a blend of trying to deal with some of current needs and then trying to address some future ones. We talked a little bit about the Treasury guidance to move some of these, at least the payroll for our public safety, to charge our labor to the payroll for public safety to the extent possible. And then at the end of the meeting, there were some conversations about making sure that if the administration or we are in a situation where we have to take future actions as relates to coronavirus that might shut down businesses or close schools or do other things that might otherwise impact people's daily lives in their work or just their ability to function, that we make sure that there's CARES funds potentially available to support any of those future emergency orders or other actions that might be necessary to preserve the health of the community. And then the last one, I think a comment was, the BAC recognized at the beginning of the work session that we're sort of at the end of the decision-making process here, and how much more time does the BAC actually want to put into this? Because I think a lot of comments have been made. Assemblymember France and some other assembly members have mentioned, while these decisions have been made, there is obviously opportunity for flexibility and there will likely be change in it. So that is, in a nutshell, where we left off. And so, Mr. Chairman, if you want to maybe continue or pick up with questions from the commission members on where the BAC wants to go with the CARES Act funding, I will leave it up to you at this point.
All right, yeah, thank you for that, Lance. So I do have, my overall thought is that I think I generally like the distribution that's here. Maybe one nagging thing for me is that, and it's mentioned in your recap, Lance, and we talked about it a little bit last time. But I would say that probably some more dedicated funding going toward job retraining or workforce readiness for those that are unemployed, I think could be a really sound investment, with the funds. I think that training capacity and workforce development issues, are, plague our businesses and our economy. We just don't always have enough people trained in any given area. And I would say that there is some level of workforce effort in this. I think there's the rural cap job weatherization one, and I thought there were maybe one or two other things, but I'd say that especially when the assembly wanted to hear some ideas about that, the $15 million contingency, the unallocated funding in their roadmap, and I would put in a word for maybe some more training efforts. And I don't know if others support that or not.
Hey, Nolan, this is Alyssa. I wholeheartedly agree. I think I've appreciate you saying that. I've brought that up in a couple of different meetings. That I think it's really important. I think in order for us to have businesses on the other side that are doing well, and instead of just kind of barely being able to get by, and keep people employed and the lights on, to be able to have some functioning businesses that are still active and still contributing and make Anchorage a place that we want to live and be. I think having the muni pay for some training and give access to it, I think would be really helpful, because I think it's a hard ask to say, oh, you worked so hard to get this grant funding, now go out and train yourself with it and make sure that you're staying up to date and competing with that small amount of funds that you were given. And I think if the muni does something like that, it makes it much more affordable. On the one hand, the muni can do it at a broader scale that makes it available for all businesses, or that sort of thing. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. What feedback from others on the BAC? Thank you, Alyssa.
This is Lindsay. I guess I was just sort of curious if anyone has any more information about the $21 million for the first responders. That was just, when I look at the allocation, that was just kind of stood out to me, and I wasn't really sure the rationale for that.
I thought that was oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, Lance can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the money that would go towards first responders, and that also potentially frees up other general funds for other purposes.
That's true.
Yeah.
So it's more to free up funds than because they specifically have any greater need than they ever have. Just to clarify, right?
I think, the Treasury basically, and the $21 million, I think it's a small amount to be applied to the public safety labor. But to Lindsay's question, yes, what it actually does is that those services were funded with local dollars, and the Treasury guidance has basically encouraged us to make sure that if to the extent possible, we can charge those services using the CARES Act funds to cover public safety activities during COVID. The result of that is that it actually frees up other local dollars for other purposes. They may be some of these things here. It may be we're in a situation when we end the year that our revenues are short and we have local dollars. We may be able to help in that way. But that is exactly what it was for, is to basically support the public safety.
I see Carla's hand up.
Oops, sorry, I was on mute. Lance, also the last time we talked, you were going to find out, although it was a smaller amount on the scale, what the assembly expansion or whatever that particular line item was. I don't have Nolan's graph in front of me. It was something like assembly.
Oh, yes. Lila, can you bring the sheet up? The table? I think you're referring up right there, down.
I'm sure it's perfectly legitimate, right? It's just an interesting topic.
Carla, I did not follow up. My apologies. I will, and unless Desiree's on and she can answer it, but I'll have to follow up.
Okay, thank you.
I don't want to keep skipping around here, but I do know that if we go online and we go to the Assembly's page, there's probably a description of the Assembly Department's capacity for that 175,000. If you would like us to do that, we can certainly jump in there.
No, I can do that on my own. But since I have the floor or whatever, I also wanted to mention the Muni put out the CARES grant, which I thought was fabulous. I'm glad they did. And they made the restrictions on it less than what they were previously, which I think is fantastic. It does exclude anybody who went into business in, let's say, late 2019, early 2020. If your dream was to open up a pie shop and you opened it up on January 2nd, you're excluded. If you had a job, basically the business that you got the grant for had to be your primary source of income in 2019, not 2020. So that I know has excluded some people. But kudos to the Muni for getting some money out there and making it a little easier to get to.
So Carla, to the chair, Carla, is there something that you could suggest in the event there's future allocations of funds to support small businesses and the administration ought to consider? Did you have some thought in mind? And if you do, maybe you could share it with me and the body later, if not today.
Yeah, let me think about that. I mean, I've found out now, being in this business, and for those of you that have been part of this business before, meaning the hospitality industry, you find that it's a very kind of a fly-by-night thing in a way. A lot of people go from they're entrepreneurs at heart. They go from kind of one entity to the next, to the next, to the next, in a way, until they find one that catches fire. And so you'll have a lot of people who owned a smaller business, then stopped that and went in a different direction. And anybody who depends upon this money for 2020, it's all based on your 2019 income. So we're almost through 2020 now. I mean, 3/4 of the way through. So just a thought, and I don't have a solution. I don't. I know it's hard to decide who gets what and when they get it. I know with the, and sorry to talk for so long, but I know with the original PPL and with the EIDL, there were very large corporations applying for that. Ones that didn't need the money, but I talked to a few of them and they were like, well, the government's giving it to us for free, so we might as well go grab it. So it's tough. I feel like small entrepreneurs are especially people who are really mom and pop shops are the last to know about these things and the last to be able to get their paperwork together, and so that they end up getting left out.
I would say, I think one of the things to keep in mind with any of the relief programs is that there have been some concepts that have been out there became too restrictive and they were hard to use, and then some were too easy to use, and like PPP initially at least got some businesses that probably didn't need it, and and I guess in a pandemic response, I think there's a question to be had of whether you accept some funding going where it's maybe not the highest priority if it helps the businesses on the whole. I think I think that some of the response to the pandemic was kind of like this might go to some that don't need it as much, but on the whole it's a good program. I do want to keep us moving along on this, and Jimmy has his hand up too.
Yeah, I just wanted to add kind of to this element. I think the local program, the AK Cares was clearly too restrictive in the way that it was handled. I think the money that went through Cook Inlet Lending has been far simpler. I mean, it's smaller amounts. It's a fixed $10,000 grant, but their technology and approach appears to be far simpler and open to far more people because of that, which I think is great. Since we're talking PPP, I do want to highlight that the program expired with money in the coffers. So, I don't know where the right and the wrong is there, but it was enough money theoretically because it didn't all get used up. So it is challenging for small businesses to get access, but there were consultants out there. There were people to help guide that process. But I think creating as few restrictions as possible is clearly the way to get the money out the door quickly, because to Carla's point, it's challenging to get the right documentation together for the right program. And in the credit union one who was administering the program for the AK Cares money just was wholly unprepared for how much how many documents they were going to see for each individual application. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Jimmy. So I want to to keep us on track. I haven't always been as good at keeping the agenda moving quickly. We have if we stick with the 30 minutes that we have allocated to this topic, we've got about 9 or 10 minutes left. And what I think we probably need to decide is is there a recommendation on these allocations that we should make? I think if I'm hearing two things, I think it's some interest around training and workforce, and also some interest in maybe expanded business relief programming. Are those the two areas that are sort of on the table for consideration for us to do a resolution or provide other input to the Assembly?
I mean, this is Lindsay. I mean, I think if there was an opportunity to provide more funding in the family support arena, I just think that that's going to be a need that's going to be there for a long time, and pretty critical to opening back up our economy, like allowing parents to get back to work when it's safe to do so. And I think that along with job training and everything, I think that's going to be a big part of our economy rebounding.
I would definitely agree with that. Would you say that the categories that are here, the licensed child care relief, rent and mortgage assistance, do you think that what's in there for those, does that help to address that need, or should one of those programs be expanded in your view, or is there a different need that should be thought about?
I guess, if there is a way, I think that it's a lot of money and it seems like a relatively small percentage is going to that, perhaps expanding the licensed childcare or, yeah, that'd just be one area where I would support a greater allocation.
Okay. That's a good point. So clarifying question, Lance, is that I see two different versions of the CARES Act breakdown. One I've got is like 2 pages on the assembly page, and then I've got the one that you've been showing on your screen, and they appear to be a little bit different, and I'm not sure if the categories are just different, but do you know, is one more current than the other?
Nolan, I will verify because I was talking to Desiree this morning looking for some information. She said that this page had been updated recently, and so I do not know if this is the most current, but I know there had been some initial changes or some changes in general, but I think the numbers might not be exact, but I think the proportionality is pretty close. I would have to go back and verify that.
Maybe one way we could frame recommendations if we want to do a resolution, I think we should probably decide pretty quickly if we want to do one, is we could say, and because what I was kind of wondering is if that the contingency fund, sorry, my little girl wants to weigh in on this meeting too, but if the contingency fund is still on the table, we could do a proposed breakdown of that funding. Sorry, we could do maybe like a proposed breakdown of like the 14.9, call it, $15 million. We could say, something like in our estimation, we'd like to see, 5 million go to child relief, 5 million to training, and 5 million to workforce, or some, that's just, I'm just throwing out a number, but something along those lines as a way of expressing our input. I don't know what people reaction to that might be.
So what is sorry, this is Lindsay again, and if someone could remind me the sort of the purpose of the contingency fund. Is it just for unexpected and things that, unanticipated costs at this moment?
Lindsay, that is, yes. I think there was some interest from the Assembly and the administration. There are unknown things that are going to come up beyond what we already know that we have to do. It may be that there is I think the Assembly wanted to reserve some funds just in case. And this is about not even 9, not even 10% of the total amount in the contingency. And it's for things that would be coming up in the future, not necessarily adding to the things that are already there. Now, it may be that the contingency is purpose, as Nolan suggested, is that there are some programs that are already in place that need to be beefed up. And whether they're in the child care or workforce support, or I can't remember the third category, or training. But that was its intent, is to reserve a little funds on the side for the unknown.
Okay. I understand that. I was just, how effective is it to essentially lightly earmark contingency funds?
I think it would be more appropriate to recommend your intentions rather than the categories, because we may get into one of these programs where it's, for example, direct municipal response. There's some dollars in there. They're identified in the event that we have to provide match for our FEMA program. The full intention is that the state provides the match to FEMA, and that's roughly about $12 million in there. In the event that they don't provide that match, we want to make sure that we're not dipping into our local tax dollars to provide it. So the intent would be, if we don't need that, we'll be talking to the administration and the Assembly about reallocating that potentially to family support, economic stimulus, health and safety. So I think your desires would be, if there are additional resources or a reallocation of resources, your suggestions ought to be they are in these categories or these programs. That I would suggest that rather than picking apart the contingency or any one of these and redirecting it. I think stating your intentions of where your priorities are would probably be more effective because it gives them more opportunity to say, hey, we've already got something else planned for the contingency, or we got to save it. We're not going to use it, so we're not going to put anything else. But if there is some opportunity in other programs and they go, well, where do we put it? Because we overestimated the need and we need to reallocate, then do it in these areas. I think that would be more helpful.
Okay, that makes sense.
So yeah, and I would say, and I think that's good guidance, Lance. The reason I was thinking about it that way is that several of the assembly members specifically like framed it that way as like maybe we could use some help on potential disposition of that contingency of like priorities for its use. But I think you're probably right in being more general. Jimmy, was your hand up from before? Or did you want to say something else?
Nope, that's from before. My apologies.
And Star, I see your hand up. Did you want to weigh in on something?
Well, I don't know if it's appropriate for me to comment or not, is it?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I guess the one thing, I'm also on the thread board, and just what we hear at the school district is, there really is not much childcare for school age children. And because we really don't know when we're going to have kids back in school, it could be as soon as October, but it's unsure. It does create more of a burden on families because there is childcare out there for, there's a, what do I want to say, Boys and Girls Club, and the school district has designated a couple of places for them to operate, but that's going to be a continued strain on parents too, the longer that we keep school age children out of school. So just a consideration. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Let's see. So our time on this is our originally scheduled time on this is all up, and I'm not sure if we're closer to a group consensus opinion on this. Does anyone have ideas where we should take this?
This is Alyssa. Can we do the thing where, do we even feel like we have enough to kind of start a draft resolution and then have Lance do what you've so kindly done in the past, where you kind of draft something up and we send our feedback to you and then you send it back out to everyone? Is that something that we can kind of work on so that we're not so that we can keep on track, but also know that we collectively want to make some sort of comment and we'll work on it through email?
Yeah, I think I have a lot of material. I think I could put some stuff together for you guys. One piece I wanted to mention is, Nolan, you said that there were sort of three categories based on the discussion of the BAC that there would be interest in making sure that their priority use of these funds, that their programs are supported or that there's reallocation. There was childcare, workforce, and can you remind me of the third category, please?
I think small business relief.
Small business relief. What I'll do is, let me take a shot at it. I'm going to start with using some of my notes, my bullets about, in general agreement with the framework, I think some of the points that were mentioned last week, be proactive, don't be reactive. The training program is repetitive, I think, in this discussion, making sure that we have some clarity on the priorities in these particular places. And then, I think Jimmy brought some great points about not necessarily the programs, but the process, making sure that it's simple and that it's easy to navigate. I think Carla mentioned that, it's the big industry. It's easy for them to sort of navigate this, but really the new starts and small businesses are the ones that need the help. And so making sure that we're taking extra effort to pay attention to them. And then Lindsay's point about what are we doing with the payroll for the public safety. I think I have enough to put it together. And then if I miss something, I'll let you guys comment accordingly, and I will send that out tomorrow and let you guys have your way with it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Lance. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Then I think with that, we can probably move on to the next item on our agenda. Assembly report is what we've got next, I think. And I do not know if we've got, I don't think we have either Cameron or Suzanne on the call. Is there anything to be said on assembly reports that you have, maybe Lance?
I would just say their next meeting is on September 15th. The one thing that will be before them they have a lot going on, the things that I'm aware of. The documentation for the distribution of the ML&P proceeds will be on that for introduction for the 15th, for a public hearing on the 25th. We're planning on a close on the 30th. So that will be the Assembly's action there. I can't speak to other matters that are not necessarily budget related. They've been going all out, so I don't have much else to offer, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that, Lance. I did see. I think I missed a comment in the chat from Tasha about one more thought is whether the CARES money can be spent on the port to ensure our supply chain remains intact. And I think that probably some of the answer to that is just the timeline of the spending of the funding makes it very difficult to do something like that because it would have to be expended by the end of the year. And so it's been hard to do public works type projects with CARES funding. But is that your impression, Lance?
Yes.
Yeah. So okay. So then I think we can move on to the school district, and so I think we've got it's Mr. Ratliff and Ms. Marcette.
So I'm gonna. Andy and I spoke a little bit. I think the district administration put together some information for the board. I asked Andy if he could share a shorter version than the 45 minutes he shared with the board. So I'll either turn it over to Andy or Star, and one of you can start. Go right ahead.
And
This is Andy. I can go ahead and start, and Star can jump in as she sees fit. But if I can try to share my screen here. Any idea how to do that on here?
Yeah, you see the little box with the arrow on the toolbar?
I do.
So click
Here we
that.
go. Okay, can we see that?
Yeah, looks good.
Yep.
If I turn it to a slideshow, does that?
Yep, perfect.
All right, you can see that? Okay. So this was a presentation that Jim and I gave to the school board a couple of weeks ago at a finance committee meeting that details out really, what our foundation formula, get kind of an overview of that, what some potential revenue scenarios are based on our current enrollment, what our current enrollment was at the time. It really hadn't changed a whole lot. Kind of where some of these students are going, because we do have a fairly sizable decline in enrollment. And then some information about what we've spent our COVID money on and some of the other things that are coming down the pike. You've all seen this before. It's the foundation formula. You guys can see that, right?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
It's kind of strange on my screen here. But really, what we're focusing on here is a few different items. The first step is school size adjustment, and then there's other factors, including intensive needs and correspondence, that when those are altered, that really kind of affects our funding. The calculation in between is static, but those are the ones that when we have changes in enrollment really gets affected. And part of what we'll focus on is in the state statute, there's a hold harmless provision where if you lose greater than 5% of your school size adjusted ADM, then you're held harmless of about 75% of the loss. So we tried to pin down what, but that's kind of a moving target because as you get fewer students in the classroom in each school, you get a larger school size adjustment. So the next slide, you can see this graph at the very bottom left, how that looks. So as the school gets bigger, the less value you get per ADM. So it's kind of a sliding scale. As you get more students in the school, less money per student. The other thing to focus on would be the intensive needs. Currently, it's about whenever we lose intensive needs students below what we had originally projected, it's about $95,000 for the state funding and the local match per student. Generally, in the past years, we've talked about increasing those numbers after the budget's been developed. When we increase, we say that number is about 77,000 because we don't get that 23% additional local match on the tax. But when we lose those students, that's, you know, the 23% we can no longer collect. The other thing is right now we have about 1,000 students that have moved from neighborhood schools to ASD's homeschool programs, predominantly our correspondence charter schools, family partnership, and Frontier. One thing to know, when students move over to those, we have to provide the amount of funding per state statute that goes over to them. So we have to find that money within the rest of the district budget. And it's about $6,500 per student. So we're looking at about maybe $6.5 million or so in funding for those correspondence schools needing to come from elsewhere in the district. It's what we've already budgeted. And as we go through, I think I've put in 5 different revenue scenarios here, and they're all going to highlight different things. So there will be a few different changes in each one that are highlighted, and some things will stay consistent, like correspondence schools. We know there's about 1,000 increase, so you'll see that on the calculations. These first 2 scenarios are requests that we've gotten, or other school districts have also put into the legislature for somewhat hold harmless funding or different calculations rather than our 20-day October count in the current year to fund the current year. So scenario number 1, it was based on, I believe this was a request from the Kenai School District to put it to the legislature, fund us at the FY20 actual ADM. So there would be a 1-year lag in between the foundation count and the foundation funding. For Anchorage School District, this would get about $3 million in additional regular intensive needs ADM, or regular ADM, and that's just based on our we projected a 300 student loss in FY21 and just regular ADM. So we'd get that money back, but we'd lose money on the intensive needs side because we expected more in FY21. So we expected 1,091 to come in FY21. You know, in FY20, we had 1,022 actual intensive needs students. So overall, that would reduce about 3.7 million. And the other request was, I believe, Matsu was based on what the projections we gave to DEED in last November. So that'd be about a $6.5 million loss, predominantly on the intensive needs side. One thing to note about these 2 scenarios is they would take legislative action to actually change the statute to be able to accept these formulas. Right now, all the indications we have from DEED is they're going to go off the October count. Getting to that, there's a revenue scenario number 3, which will highlight the, I think we mostly use this slide to highlight the value of those intensive needs. So if we were to lose 5,000 students with no change in our intensive needs from what we budgeted, if we get the 1,091 we budgeted, we would lose about $8 million in regular ADM, and then we would have to give $6.5 million over to those correspondence schools. So we'd get more money, but that has to come from somewhere else. And overall, our revenue would be down about $1.5 million. The next 2 the 4th and 5th column, I guess, over, where it just kind of highlights the value of those intensive needs. So if we drop another 70 intensive needs, 69, 70 intensive needs from what we had budgeted, you know, that's $6.5 million. You know, if we go to about 900, which is a little bit more than what our current count is, that's about $18 million in intensive needs funding. And it's kind of hard to say why those students haven't shown up yet. A lot of them are our ability to test kindergartners. We don't incoming kindergartners and preschool students. You know, a lot of the testing requires face-to-face interaction with the students, and that just can't happen with a lot of these kids if they're medically fragile or whatever. So a lot fewer incoming preschoolers and kindergartners that are testing, and then the other ones that might move into district, we're having a hard time getting those certified as intensive needs. But kind of a relative value for 100 kids. That's 100 kid loss on intensive needs. That's about $9.5 million per 100 students. So really, this slide was meant to highlight the drop in the intensive, or the change in the intensive needs students whenever that number goes down. The last couple scenarios are really going to show the break point between and the value of this hold harmless clause. So the hold harmless clause again is 5% of, if we reduce our school size ADM numbers, so that's line 9. If that goes down by more than 5%, hold harmless kicks in. So the middle column there shows about a 2,700 student loss from FY20, and at some point between $2,700 and $2,600 loss, hold harmless kicks in. So before it kicks in, or after it kicks in, it's about a $2.6 million loss in regular ADM, but somewhere along the line, if we lose 2,600 students, it's about $18.5 million loss. So you can really see the value that hold harmless clause would bring to the district on this slide. And again, the correspondence schools and intensive needs, for the purposes of just kind of showing where these revenue numbers might fall, we've left them, the intensive needs, the same as we had this year, or I mean, as our FY20, and then the correspondence, what we actually think they'll have is about a $6.5 million increase in funding. So this is just kind of a summary of all that. We've put for the scenarios 3, 4, and 5, we did put a kind of a range, and the range is predominantly dependent on how many intensive needs students we lose, between 0 and 191. So between our estimate of 1,092 students and the 900, or 1,091 and 900 students. So we're kind of looking at scenario number 5. If we do have a 2,600 ADM decline, that's really kind of our worst case scenario at this time, where we could lose potentially up to $30 million if we have the loss of intensive needs students and don't meet that hold harmless provision. And then on top of that $30 million, we'd need to find $6.5 million to give to our correspondence schools to make up their loss, or their increase in funding for having more students. This is a quick enrollment update that we had as of August 17th. I haven't updated the slide, but the gap between 20 and 21 hasn't closed significantly. It was about 5,000 on this slide. I believe it's maybe 45 or 4,600 now. We're still trying to go verify a few hundred more students, but at this time we're really just trying to finish getting all the paperwork in at the school level, so they trigger our reports to say, yes, this kid's enrolled, yes, he's taking classes, and yes, he lives in the Anchorage school, Anchorage Bowl, or the district. Where are the kids going? Here's kind of a quick breakdown of where they were going at this time. Almost 200 kids went to Matsu. And we don't know what the out migration would have been in the last several. We have seen some out migration to Matsu. I think it's been typically in the 90 to 100 range, maybe a little more. So we do think some folks who are working out in Matsu, or working in Anchorage but live in Matsu, who are no longer commuting into Anchorage, probably enrolled their students out there. The biggest one is, you can kind of see on the right, the Raven, Idea, Cyberlinks. These are the statewide correspondence schools. So you can see a lot of the AD or the ASD students kind of migrating over, a little over 1,000 to in-state correspondence that aren't part of the district. The bottom chart shows the correspondence that have actually migrated to in-district correspondence students. So we've had an increase of about a little over 800 at this time. I think it's up to about 1,000 now. So just kind of give you an overview of where these students are going to, because we don't think a whole lot of them moved out of the bowl, or Anchorage in general. But so most of them have gone to correspondence, is what we believe. As far as our COVID response funding, the board approved $2 million in April, after we initially closed, to fund PPE, things like that. Our CARES Act, we've gone over this, our health teachers, IT, course development. You can kind of read the list, and I know we've talked about it in this group, so I don't want to kind of belabor that. And then the board had approved another memo in July to help kind of reading early education initiatives, as we know these students coming back from a really long break are going to need some more help than they normally would. And then we had to buy some additional software to get our virtual schools program up and running, as well as put more money to Chromebooks and PPE. This slide just kind of details where those costs went, or a little bit higher breakdown of what we're spending the money on with regards to PPE and IT and how that curriculum money is spent. But it's really similar to the slide before, but just a little bit more detail on how it is in total, or how the three funding sources kind of roll together as well. We do expect to have some cost savings while we're in the online environment. Substitute teachers, that was the biggest one, I think. At the end of the last quarter that we were shut down, we saved about $2 million in substitute teachers. However, there is some different behaviors in the first quarter versus the fourth quarter. Many more field trips and things occur in the fourth quarter. So historically, we've used more subs in the fourth quarter than first. But we do expect to have some savings there. We've been holding some positions vacant and unfilled because we don't really know, if we're going to need them. A lot of these aren't school-based employees or teachers, so just try to hold those as many open as we can in the event that these positions or the students don't come back and we need to make reductions elsewhere. Transportation, our cost of fuel and cost of our contract is lower than it was. Student activities and workers' comp, that's more people staying home means probably fewer people getting hurt. And then the admin costs of just having the folks in the building are expected to be a little lower. And we don't really know what the actual savings on that will be, but we expect to have some in those areas, although we don't expect it to be significant. Some of the unknown things we're looking at is our federal stimulus bills. There's various bills by the House, Senate, and the President. But we don't know when we would get them or the amount. I think the Senate and the House bills both had considerably more funding for K-12 education than the CARES Act did. So if one of those were to go through, we could potentially see more funding than the $12 million we originally got. From the state and city side, we're just kind of exploring our options with the state to see if they would be open to modifying the formula to either look at FY20 or the previous year as a funding model, or even a previous 3 years, or additional grant supports from the municipality. There was, you saw the $1 million they've added for mental health supports, and I think $250,000 for pre-K within the Muni's CARES money. Then kind of the other things we don't know is once students come back in, the PPP or PPE usage rates, how much hand sanitizer they're using, how many disposable using, and that's really tied to the risk level when the students come back. So as we need those to use those supplies, we really don't have any sort of basis or historical data to predict what that usage is going to be. How many times kids are going to lose their mask throughout the day. It's really hard to predict, but it could be up in the millions of dollars that we have to fund additional PPE once they come back to school. We've got enough to get everyone in and last several weeks, months, but we will need more support depending on what that usage is. The intensive needs number has continued to go up, but we really don't know where that's going to land, and those students have a lot of value to them. The number of students who will return to ASD, this is one of the other things that we don't know, is all these parents have migrated their students over to either in-district or statewide correspondence schools. How many of those will choose ASD once the schools are open and kids can return to actual classes? And also the timing on that. So if that occurs in November after the 30-day October count, that's really funding we won't get, but it'll have more students we need to educate. And the last one, the increased unemployment and medical costs. That's one thing we saw is our fourth quarter unemployment bill went from about, usually ranges 35 to 50,000. It went up to about $500,000. Predominantly, that's due to all the subs and temp employees that have been working on a consistent basis, but then no longer able to, since we had all the sub savings, we weren't hiring the subs, they were able to claim unemployment, and we're self-insured for unemployment, so that cost gets passed through to us. And then the increase in medical, if employees are coming down, or as communities coming down with COVID, that increases our medical premiums. That's another potential unknown that we really don't know how that's going to affect us. The other thing we talked about was our future financial impacts, and that's looking forward to our FY22 budget deficit. For FY21, we added $8.3 million in usage of fund balance to stem some staff layoffs and reinstate the Ignite program. We've also spent $2.7 million on the virtual software for schools, and that's just a one-year licensing fee. So we would need to pay that again next year if we keep that going. As you know, health teachers we put into our CARES money, and that's one-time money. So if we want to retain those health teachers, it's another $3.2 million. And then we put a significant amount of our CARES money into automating our having one-to-one student-to-device ratio for grades 3 through 12. To maintain that, we would need about $4.8 million or so. And then just regular annual contract inflation, it's about 10 to 12 million, assuming 2% growth. So in total, that gets to about $29 million in expenditures with no real increase in revenue on the horizon and potentially a decrease. So that's kind of what we're looking at. We'll have this a little more flushed out come December when we present our pro forma budget to the board. But we're really, want to make you guys, community, the school board aware that we could have significant deficits heading into FY22 if no new money becomes available. So with that, I'll open it up to questions if you have any.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation.
Yeah, I wanted to add something, if that's okay. This is Star.
Please.
One of the things that Andy didn't mention that could be another loss for us is transportation. With the loss of students, and when we do go back to school, even if it's 2 days a week, just because we've lost those students doesn't mean that we can necessarily reduce bus routes unless they're all in one area. So we do have the possibility of possibly losing another 2.5 million, but we're looking into that. And I just wanted to throw that out that there is possibly another loss, but it is concerning for us. Our budget, kids come back to school. We're not going to be able to lay off or to do the non-hires. We'll have to get teachers back into the classrooms. We'll have substitutes. There will be additional cost and possibly not the funds to support that.
Sure.
Right, that's a great point that we didn't have included. And the $2.5 million comes from about the 4,500 to 5,000 students not returning by the state's rate that they pay us of $481 per student for transportation.
So yeah, and I'll open it up for for questions from the BAC. If anyone has any, I do have one quick thought, and we can file this under let's not hold our breath. But there has been, of course, the in Congress the talk about another relief package, and it that sort of fell apart between the House version and the Senate version, which were very distant from one another, but both were trying to provide some level of relief package, and the House version, the HEROES Act, did contain a huge amount of money for state and local government, and I believe would include a lot of funding for school districts. Is that something that you were tracking at all, Andy?
Yeah, we've been watching the House and Senate versions. I think I want to say it was over 100 billion in there for education-related items. In the CARES Act, there was, I think, a little over 13 billion. So, and it kind of depends on how they divvy that up between primary, secondary, post-secondary education. It's how much we would get and how they distribute it. You know, the CARES Act was distributed by Title I status. So if they chose to do it a different way, I mean, that could potentially alter the amount. But yes, that's something we were looking forward to. And I think our CFO has been in contact with Lisa Murkowski's office to help try to push some of these along. But, you know, we're kind of just waiting and seeing where those end up.
And the other thing with that too, this is Star, is you will probably see more funds going to, they're going to try to send them out to private schools for to distribute the funds instead of just public schools. So that will be less money for public schools, could possibly happen.
Sure. Other questions, comments, anything from BAC?
Hey, Andy, this is Alyssa. I was just kind of curious, you know, we were talking about SPED funds and intensive need funds a lot. And I'm curious, how are those services being delivered right now? How are those kids who have really intensive needs, are they in the classroom, or how's that all working?
That's a very good question. I don't know that I really know the complete answer how those are delivered. Right now, we don't have any students in the classroom, so I can tell that they're not there. But to be honest, you know, that's not I answer for you from our instructional folks, but it's not something that I've really been privy to.
Yeah,
Star might actually have a good information on this too.
So at this time, we are trying to provide as many services as we can virtually or through telecommunications, but it's, you know, a lot of these children are vulnerable to, it would be devastating for them to contract this virus. And so we do want to keep them safe, and so their parents. So it's certainly not optimal of what they need, but to keep them safe, this is our option, and we are trying to meet each IEP as best we can.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I was just kind of generally curious, and then was also thinking, you know, from the budget perspective, how not, I don't know, the differences in, you know, kind of having traditional students not be in the classroom versus having special needs and intensive needs students not in the classroom. I was just trying to wrap my mind around how that impacts the budget differently. I feel like every time you talk, Andy, I have questions about SPED, but sorry about that. And thank you for it.
Sure. Thanks, Alyssa. Other questions from our group? See, I'm not seeing anything, but thanks. It's good detailed presentation, Andy. So appreciate you coming and sharing with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. Then I think we can move on. We've got next up is I believe Lance is going to talk to us about budget update and the 120-day memo, among other things. So go ahead and take it, Lance.
Well, actually, if I could take another look at the agenda.
Oh, am I skipping something?
Yeah, I think we wanted to hear from the rest of the BAC members about how they went with department heads.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I missed that. My apologies. Okay,
and I think Lindsay was the last one to speak last time on M&O. Carla, I don't think you got a chance to talk about parks, or maybe you did, but I think you're next.
No, I didn't talk about them.
Okay.
Are you? Can everybody hear me okay? Because you guys are breaking up a lot for me.
I hear you fine.
Okay. I'll try to put it in a nutshell. I did email all of you. I hope that you got it. Michelle McNulty's presentation that she provided us, it was very good and very thorough. It's obvious that she's very well respected by her coworkers and the people who work with her within the Muni. She seems to be doing a really great job of trying to bring the department together and do some catch up on deferred maintenance. Some of the problems that she ran into, or both departments that I talked to, is what can the BAC do for you? And her point was that right at this moment, she's not really given and you're going to find this in Parks and Rec too, she's not really given a budget for maintenance, not deferred maintenance, but just to get ahead of the game. It seems like they're always reacting and trying to fix things after the fact, and it doesn't work very well for their planning, and they really don't have the budget to just do a regular maintenance schedule on some things. So that's both Parks and Rec and planning had that issue. Another issue that Michelle was running into is that she has a very senior staff. She has a lot of people who may retire in the next year. She's on the hook for any leave that they may have, or any built up vacation, sick leave. She's on the hook to pay that out within her department. While we were on conversation, I mentioned to Lance that maybe there's a better way the Muni can do that, possibly in some kind of G&A or overhead type situation, rather than the individual departments having to pay out people that retire. So something to look into in the future if we have the chance or have the time, so the departments aren't burdened with that. But Michelle gave a great presentation. I forwarded it to you all, so you can look at it. And if you have any questions, I'm sure that Michelle or Lance can answer those for you. Parks and Rec is a very large department. There was a lot of moving parts. They have the same issue. Obviously, they've been hit with COVID. Their budget has been hit because they have less users, people not renting park space. Obviously, any of their indoor buildings that they may maintain are not being used right now. Most have been shut down. So they've lost those users. Plus, they have additional COVID restrictions that they need to put on all people using the parks, probably additional cleaning, additional sanitation. So that's been a hit to their budget. And one of their largest issues also was coming up with a good budget and a good plan for maintaining the parks and not being reactionary to things that may be going wrong. We also did talk a little bit about the homeless situation in the parks. They do maintain that. They have hired, I have notes here, but it would take me forever to get through them. I believe, and Lance can correct me if I'm wrong, that they did hire additional staff that are just for kind of cleaning up homeless camps within the parks and maintaining that. So basically, I think that's about it. Lance, anything that you want to add on either one of those?
I think on the planning one, in Michelle's role, the maintenance, she just has a lot of sort of office-related types of activities, the maintenance, and they do get a small budget in their supplies and equipment, but if she has a big thing to take care of, and if you know anything about the planning business, they have GIS, they have City View, and they share a lot of those resources with other departments, and so they all kind of have to kick it in and scrounge it up together. So that is correct. The issue with the leave cash out is a significant one, particularly in Michelle's case. She has 3 people that have been there over 31 or 2 years, and 2 of them have a significant amount of cash. And so the key there is to departments have a leave cash out budget, but it's based on basically a 3-year or 5-year average of their retirements. But when they have these blips, if we're not aware of them, they do have to manage that within their approved budget, or we have to go to the assembly to give them more. But creating a sort of a separate program, that was a really good idea that Carla had. And then the Parks and Rec department, I think the one thing that you are correct, Carla, we did hire 14 people permanent for camp cleanup from, I think it's April through October. But I think you hit all the highlights on that. And thank you for doing it very much. You did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, who is up next?
I think Lindy is up with the police department. She had the police department.
All right, go for it, Lindy.
Okay, I will try to make this make sense. Like handwritten notes are just a mess for me, so I'm so sorry if this jumps around a lot. So I met with Chief Dahl, Mike Curl, and Ken McCoy. And And it was a really good discussion. We covered a lot, so that's why my notes are so messy. But I also started, with the, what can the BAC do to help improve APD with the budgeting process and things like that. And Chief Dahl shared, that his main focus has been a few different things. First, it was getting, more sworn officers in. The direct responders who actually go out and respond to the calls in person, things like that. So the sworn officers. Next, his priority is getting dispatch up. That's where a lot of the wait times and, overtime is happening. So longer wait times because they're understaffed. So, just when people are calling in, there's trouble there. And then because they're understaffed, lots of overtime. So people are, that staff is about 2 times as expensive as they should be, or 1.5 times as expensive as it should be. So that's kind of one of his next priorities to handle. And it takes a while for dispatch to get ready to actually go, since they have about a year of training. So there's a little bit of a delay there. We talked about kind of what's going on with APD and COVID a little bit. Thankfully it hasn't impacted their operations as much. And so that hasn't been like a huge, negative factor for how APD is operating. And I think there was an article about how, crime is actually not increasing right now. So that's good. And then let me see. Records is also one of the areas that he would like to kind of beef up and address. They had a pretty significant backlog for requests, and so they've been working to, handle that. But yeah, it really crazy with how many just this backlog request for case reports and things like that due to, more understaffing. And then the last kind of priority he had was the non-labor costs that are associated with APD. And so that's a lot of things in that non-labor category. But he said that there's about $500K a year in their budget that isn't planned for in that non-labor category that they do have to, deal with, whether it's equipment failures, things that need to be replaced, different maintenance, things like that, that just, they don't have it in the budget, but they end up having to spend that $500K that they really don't want to, or that they at least would like to plan for. So yeah, that non-labor gap is one of the next steps that he wants to deal with. And that's normally where they go over budget. Let me see. We talked a bit about kind of the new expenses that Lance had mentioned before. So now there's going to be the consistent academies about twice a year, I believe. And then the fleet, not replacement, but new vehicles for the fleet. And we talked about that a little bit, how that system, the various systems that work with the fleet and the different technology that they have in general at APD are just way, they are old and outdated and not as efficient as they could be, but they've been kind of recycling and reusing the different parts and putting them in the new vehicles. So these new vehicles will have, 20-year-old systems in them that are this close to failing. And so that's a big concern is, how long will that equipment keep going for them? So the stuff that's in their fleets, and then as well as just their, I believe it's called, let me find that, CAT RMS. That's their other system-wide program that they use, and that he, his prediction is that could die any day. And that's kind of one of those things that's on his brain constantly. So it's just a huge overhaul that they need for, how the APD actually operates with their technology, in addition to some of their other like on the ground technology that is failing. So that could be a big expense upcoming that he's predicting. And, you know, it's difficult because it's like you can't really bond for like a subscription service, which is what they would need for their new technology. But yeah, so that's something that he's thinking about constantly. There are some cost savings that he talked about. I think, Lance, you mentioned that the State Crime Lab is something APD is taking advantage of. And so that's really great that they're looking for those as well. But it's difficult. He, you know, Chief Dahl was saying that he recognizes that they have been given more of like the funding that's come back to different departments. And so he's very grateful for that. And like kind of recognizes the place of privilege that they are in that way. But, you know, at the same time, it's still not enough necessarily for them to be ahead of the game and to actually be like a healthy and, you know, operating entity. And he also invited us all for a ride along once that is safe to do. So if you're interested, he said, yeah, please contact the office and we could do a ride along. I did have more questions for him, but I haven't gotten them to him yet. So there were other things we covered, but I think those were the main points, unless I missed something, Lance.
No, I think you covered. I talked to Chief Dahl yesterday and today, and I asked him if he had seen your name on the Academy applicant list yet, and he said he hadn't. I told him, well, you did such a good job that I would be surprised if she's actually not thinking about changing professions. So
it was a really good talk. I really enjoyed it. So yeah.
You did a great job. Thank you, Lindy. I think, you know, one of the things I would say is that Justin said that he's, you know, initially the department was spent initially in this administration spending a lot of time building up the sworn officers, and where his deficiencies are right now are in his non-sworns. Dispatch was mentioned, records is another one, and he's been addressing those last year. He has, I think, a small request this year. His top priority requests are his non-labor, as Lindy mentioned, and so those are certainly on our list. And the vehicles and the technology in the vehicles is in that business is ever changing, both for security on the technology side to make sure that it's more secure, but also that it also has more expansion capabilities because they start diving in and working with other networks, but other law enforcement agencies. But yeah, I think it was well done. Thank you, Lindy.
All right. Next up, I think we've got real estate, and we are kind of starting to push it on time. And so, if we can try to keep these to 2 or 3 minutes, that'd be perfect. We do still have a few things that we need to get from Lance before we adjourn. So, real estate, is that Jimmy?
It was Jimmy.
Hey guys, I did not realize I was going to be up, so I need to find my notes. But honestly, it was relatively straightforward. You know, the vast majority of the budget is kind of, if I remember correctly, non-labor items. I'm sorry, I'm wholly unprepared for this at the moment. Give me a second. Is there someone else who's going after me that I could come back to in just a second? My bad, guys.
Yeah, I think Alyssa can go. She can talk about the port.
Alyssa, let's see. I think Alyssa
Yeah.
said she's already talked about it. Or sorry, go ahead.
I did. No, I was gonna repeat the comment that I made in the chat section. Yeah, I've already talked about the port. If folks have questions, the port is amazing. And I did mention that the port director said that it's like crack, and I understand people wanting to know more about it. So I'm happy to share if there are questions, but I did already talk about it.
Thank you, Alyssa. That was my mistake.
Oh, no problem. And I saw it earlier and forgot to make a comment when we had a chance on the agenda.
Tasha, did you talk about health?
Yes, I did.
Okay, excellent. Well, I can just say that real estate is awesome. She's our real estate agent, but I think Jimmy and Robin, as Jimmy mentioned while he's finding his notes, one of the things about the the real estate department is one of 4 or 5 departments. They have a really big budget. Like it's $8 million for 3 people, but 7.5 of it is for lease payments and development and things like that. So I think some of the other things is that Robin Ward, who's the director there, she's basically been in the past supported by the Rasmussen Foundation to really focus on housing issues, and those that won't be afforded to her or the department in 2021. So be looking to shore up that department without the Rasmussen grant in 2021. And Jimmy, I don't have my notes either, so it's all.
Yeah, I can jump in. One of the things that I found, really interesting about the division is the way that they handle the tax foreclosures. Robin commented on how this year they were able to actually kind of solve all of those, so that very few of them actually went to market where they had to sell it to a third party, but rather they were able to work with the existing owners to kind of get out of that foreclosure status, which I think is it's an interesting nuance. It's great to keep somebody in their home or keep their real estate with them, but it's also, an opportunity for other people to buy those properties. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting kind of nuance to the way they approach that foreclosure process. It's clearly the Good Samaritan approach, which is interesting. And then, kind of just how they decide to buy and sell various pieces of real estate. I think it'll be, I believe there was a law passed last year that kind of makes it so that the municipality has the right to buy some of its own real estate rather than lease it and things like that. So I'm not finding my notes, but that's 2 to 3 minutes, I think. So I'll let us move on to the next item. Sorry, guys.
No worries, Jimmy. Then I think Lance, why don't you go ahead and take it with budget process?
Sure. I can wrap this up here and be on time here. So the first item is a budget to actuals. So I'm going to verbalize this. The month end of July, we did the month end close for July, I think last week. And at the end of the July, the municipality is basically 58% through the fiscal year. And at that point, the total amount spent is 48%, and the total amount spent and encumbered is 53.5%. So far, the expenditures are looking very good at this time of the year. For the most part, every department is under budget. There are some that are more than 5% under budget, and we'll prepare a report that we sent to the assembly as soon as it gets in and introduced to them. I'm able to send it to you. And then if you just look at, so that is by total. If you just look at their labor budget at 58% through the year, they're 56.5%. And if you look at just their non-labor, only 37% is spent and another 12% encumbered. So the departments are performing very well at the end of the 7th month of the year. So no alarming issues going on with the departments. And these reports are available online. When they get through to the assembly, there are budget to actuals report. We do them monthly. So that is good news on the 2020 budget. So I will roll on to, are there any questions or any comments or folks for departments? If you have any questions, I can answer them now or get back to you on how they're doing so far.
Lance, I did just note Suzanne LaFrance just hopped on, and I didn't know if Suzanne wanted to say wanted to share anything with this group, and it's okay if you don't, but wanted to offer you that chance and acknowledge that she just joined.
Thanks, Nolan. I was able to hop on about 12:30, so I got some of your earlier conversation. I don't want to interrupt your flow, so if Lance is done or if folks have questions for me, maybe after. I know people may have to hop off, so I'm happy to be available for questions or anything.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you.
All right. So the next item is the budget development process. So the administration sent to the assembly yesterday at the end of the day a document. It's called a 120-day memo. It's a document that's required to be submitted to the assembly. and it has it's preliminary information about our revenues, our taxes, our tax limitation. Lila, could you bring up the 120-day memo if you have the controls? Thank you. So I asked Lila to go ahead and send that to you in an email. I think we did that right before this meeting. Go to the beginning. So basically, I'll summarize some of these things. What we are required to provide is a preliminary estimate of the 2021 on our revenues. And, basically we know that overall our traditional revenues are likely to be down in totality just due to COVID-19, primarily the bed tax. There are some things that are doing well and some things that are not. So, the horizon for our regular revenues coming in, we don't think they're going to be as good as we started with, but on the next item is the alcohol tax will be kicking in next year based on voter approved this year. So that will be a roughly $12 million, and it has to be funded dedicated to new public safety and health services. It can't be used to fund existing levels of service either in the health department or other departments that are addressing public safety or health. So it has to be for new or expanded services. So for example, some of the things that could be available is the administration, with the support of the assembly, we've added some public health nurses after this budget was approved. And so the alcohol, and they're helping in behavioral health and a variety of other issues. So that would be an allocation for that. The tax cap calculation, I'm going to ask Lila to roll through. On this one here, one of the things that, just to point out, the mayor during these times, one of the things that's included are what are his, overall priorities. And at this point in time, in looking at building the budget, we continue to focus on the things that are sustaining the programs that we have to the extent that we are possible, but we're looking at, focusing on public health and safety and just getting us through this pandemic and trying to figure out how we're going to look in 21. So he's really focusing on doing everything we can to support businesses and families in this budget and whatever resources we have to make that happen. The other thing that we point out is if we're going to have any new changes in departments in 21, we will. We have two new departments. One of those is starting this year. It's the Office of Equity and Justice. It'll be, I believe, working with the mayor's office. And then we will not have ML&P, but there is, through the sale agreement, we will have something, we'll have a small utility called Anchorage Hydropower, and it's basically the Eklutna power facility where Chugach, the municipality, and MEA have a role in that. So we recognize that's going to change. And then on the tax cap, this is, go ahead and roll through. So initial information on the tax cap, this is very preliminary. There's some information that's still coming in the door. As you recall, that the tax cap is influenced by pretty much changes that are adjusted to population and inflation, both which are down a little bit, new construction, and any voter approved debt. So we make those calculations. So the bottom line at the going down to like line 47 or line 51, the total amount of limit on property taxes that could be collected within the tax cap is up about 8 million. Their influence on those things are twofold. One, inside the taxes that influence property taxes. For example, we know that line 41, motor fuel rental tax, when we collect less money in any of these categories, when you apply the tax cap calculations, if you collect more into or less in tobacco or less in aircraft or less in marijuana or any of these, the property tax number then goes up. So if we collect more money in these, then the property tax number goes down. The most significant one in this one is line 41, which is motor vehicle rental tax. That number is going to be down based on the Treasury estimate by almost a little bit more than 2.5 million. So that in and of itself influences it. So there'll be a lot more discussion on this one as we prepare and finalize it with the revenue information and get in our proposed budget. And then the last few pages, we are required to include the capital budget. And this is sort of at a high level for departments. This is generally kind of how departments would receive bond funds. It is not how the bonds would be structured. So, but this is a first look at this. There's some tweaks to be had here. Then go ahead, Lila. And then this is the six-year look by department. And again, when we get the capital budget, it will be a lot more detail. Go ahead, Lila. And then this is for all departments, for all colors of money. And then the following pages they are a business plan for each of the utilities, and it includes their capital program. So again, this is something that we have to give to the assembly. It gives a very high level overview of kind of where we are going. Both the capital budget is still in a little bit of refinement. The utilities are pretty close to being done. And then the operating budget for general government, we are still got a lot of work to do. So if you get a moment, take a look at that. And if you have questions, just let me know. And I think the last thing I want to talk about is let me go to the agenda, Lila. Just the schedule ahead. Right now, we at OMB, we are working very diligently with putting the operating budget together. Your review of the departments, the mayor has met with all of the departments as the revenue is coming in. We do our continuation budget. We are working basically daily with the administration on getting to a balanced budget. So, and our objective or our requirement is that we will be submitting it to the assembly on October 2nd, and then I'll be providing a work session on an overview on the 9th. And so I think as we're looking forward into October, we'll probably want to have some work session on the alcohol tax and the budget. So I've scheduled some meetings here. Looking ahead, Mr. Chairman, your next meeting is actually October 1st. I would suggest that you think about doing it on October 8th for two reasons. One, on October 8th, I can preview the budget with you. On October 1st, I can't. I mean, you can have a meeting on the 1st if you want to talk about something and then continue it to the 8th to talk solely on the budget. And then I think I'll have the opportunity to give you a preview of what I want to share with the assembly on the 9th. And if you have some critique, comments, and the ways I could make it better, that's always helpful. So that is a quick wrap up. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Good point, Lance. And I know you have to run here, so we can probably adjourn. But we could maybe keep October 2nd as we could do a work session if we wanted to dive into another topic, or I don't know if the timing is good on that or not. But maybe that's something we could consider if needed. But you know, in the interest of letting you get on to your next thing, Lance, are we good to adjourn?
I don't have any objections. I will send you guys a resolution draft tomorrow.
Okay. Good. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a bunch, Lance. You know, another very full meeting and a lot of good information presented. So I appreciate the work you put into this, you and Lila. I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Lindsay.
Is there a second?
Tasha, second.
All right, very good. If there are no objections, then I think we are good to adjourn. So thanks, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.